for people to embrace change and to want to adopt new tools and to kind of get out of their sort of sticking to status quo and defensive mode, which usually means that we cannot actually embrace these new technologies. And for them to open up to it, they need to sort of develop a love for themselves to be comfortable. And to develop that, they sort of need to kind of like heal out of their traumas. They essentially need to develop passion for kind of like themselves in their roles. And then they have passion for work. And if they have passion for their work, they start looking to make the work better.
Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to be here today with Matt Leta. Matt, welcome to What the Fundraising.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't we start with you just telling everybody a little bit about you and your work, and then we'll dive into all things digital transformation.
Long story short, I'm from Poland, which you will notice in my accent, but I left about 20 years ago and I've moved through, I think, 12 other countries, and which you will also probably notice in my accent to some degree. And along the way, I've founded and built a bunch of businesses. And eventually, I think about like 8 years ago, I started sort of splitting my time between running companies and doing nonprofit work, either pro bono work with my teams or funding various nonprofits and co-creating NGOs. And eventually I started my own profit called Future Horizon. And so currently to wrap it up, I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, so Boston. And I run something called FutureWorks, where we help companies embrace AI. Primarily, that means kind of working on their entire stack and primarily working with people and implementing technology when we hear what they need. And I run a nonprofit called Future Horizon, which gathers people around sort of funding, co-creating various initiatives, primarily in social justice, education, and environment.
Amazing. Okay, so one of the things I saw in your bio is the way you have helped companies with digital transformation in, I think, was it 1 hour a day, 1 hour a week?
Yeah.
Okay, so talk to me about that. Break that down, because I think when people hear digital transformation, they think big, time-consuming, we don't have the energy or capacity for that. So talk me through that.
Yeah, well, digital transformation, as the name indicates, why do we want digital transformation? Because we want our companies to run better using tech, right? And that for a very long time meant embracing things like Salesforce and other massive SaaS tools that would provide the database and help us solve some things, but would also come with 3 years of everyone really struggling, not enjoying their life until they did, and some never did, sort of embracing this tech. And that is true of hundreds of different SaaS products. And another thing that happened was everyone is bombarded increasingly by SaaS products that offer them to sell better, to run things better, to move things from one place to another, and so on. And many organizations today have 50 or 100, and sometimes we see 500 and more different SaaS apps that they use, and nothing is connected to each other and nothing really functions together. And now suddenly we've got this moment, hey, there is AI, right? And we've got this new wave where very, very, very high return on investment can be unlocked, to over 100x, right? And you can think of optimizing a certain process, cutting the cost 99%. It's absolutely possible. But most who try, they still have sort of implemented in a way that let's find some software, let's plug in this and that, and this will solve the problem, which it doesn't. It just adds to the complexity because we had 500 apps before and now we have 501 and nothing talks to each other. And so many who struggle with implementing those things and seeing actual real difference out of using AI tools are well, that's because AI needs data, so what we need to solve is our data, right? That's kind of the second step. Many realize, okay, we need to solve our data. And the truth is that that's closer, but it's not that. We're not there yet. The truth is that what is needed is actually what is needed to see real results, right? For our companies to head, or organizations or nonprofits, what will it be, to head towards a state when they're AI native, or they have this digital core. What we need is to actually work with people, right? And we need to look at the entire landscape, and I can get back to that in more detail later, but we need to look at the people firstly and what they need, then the software and data as a kind of intermediate layer between the people and the intelligence that we want to bring. And then when it's all connected, it actually works. And then we can see great results. But it will not happen as a technology first solution. We need to actually work with the people. And so a very meandering long way to kind of come back to your question, what that 1 hour a week does, which is in something we've practiced over the years, and currently it's used by hundreds of companies, big and small. What it does is it allows people from the organization to be engaged in the kind of activity of innovation. And that sort of opens them up to change, opens them up to solutions because they are part of the solution. And it drives culture change, it drives communication. And as a sort of very welcome but byproduct, it produces a lot of innovation opportunities that then you can use to transform the company, make everyone sort of celebrate successes, and it goes from there. So it all is packaged into just 1 hour a week for people because there is like a very rigid framework behind it. And that allows basically for a lot of creativity within it, but it's sort of designed to kind of keep going, start, and ideally not stop. And we've seen great results coming out of that. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm so curious about this. So tell me a little bit about, like, when you think about that sort of people first approach, do you mean positions or do you mean like the actual particular people in your organization that are sitting in those seats?
It's actually working best if you invite people across different seats and positions, so like as diverse as possible. But it's small groups that work together, spend 1 hour a week. Usually they connect only half an hour and spend half an hour doing sort of homework. That's why it's 1 hour every week. I would recommend 5 people in a group. And those sort of come with opportunities that they find for innovation. And there's like a whole cycle around it, and they go through the 4 steps, right? So like it's called LEAP because there are 4 steps, LEAP, in their titles.
Okay. And so talk to me about the piece you said at the very end. I wish I could remember exactly how you said it, but that this type of framework then actually sort of opens the door for all of these people to be innovators themselves. And they start to like own the transformation. And I can't remember exactly how you said it, but I'm really curious about that. Like, it sounds to me like what you're doing is sort of seeding an environment, or you're creating an environment for digital transformation to happen. Like when you were describing it, I was thinking a lot about gardening, and I've done a lot of work in like regenerative agriculture practice.
Yeah.
And right. So like everything focuses typically in sort of the agriculture practices that we often see today, people are focusing on like the production, right? They're like, how much out of this one thing how can I grow this tree, or how can I grow this plant in 1 year to get the most fruit? And what we know in regenerative agriculture is actually what you're focused on is the soil. And if you focus on the soil, then that's how you get the most amazing tree and plant and fruit, but you have to really focus on the soil. And so when you were talking, that's what was coming up for me, is that, okay, he's doing soil work. And then that soil is creating the environment to grow the digital transformation. Am I following this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great metaphor, And actually this metaphor goes even deeper in a sense, because I haven't used it in the book, but you nailed it in the comparison. Like the way the soil also is cultivated. We've been driving kind of various regenerative practices, and my parents have had a farm for a while, so I'm close to the subject. But so basically, what we command there is kind of like there's like a natural rhythm that we've embraced in business that comes from nature, which is quarterly activity, right? Like any company has quarterly reports and quarterly thinking and so on. Today, it's really hard to have like rigid, strong 5-year plans for business, right? Not just for startups, but for any size of company. Like the largest companies, things are changing a little too fast to be able to have long-term plans. And so switching to this sort of quarterly rhythm, seasons in a way, is very useful. And so if you look at it this way, enabling your organization and the people to sort of, kind of cultivate their practice and sort of enrich themselves with the ability to be kind of open to change and excited for what's coming and actually implementing solutions and in a distributed manner, sort of changing the entire organization to a more innovative one, that is best done also in quarters. And for a simple reason, there's usually someone approving budgets and someone keeping an eye over it and in an ideal scenario, you want to see results in less than a quarter so that you get approved for the next quarter. And so Leap cycle is 12 weeks long. And so it actually we recommend running them in 12 weeks, then 1 week break, then 12 weeks, and 1 week break, which actually magically ends up filling up the entire year. And so you can just keep running it this way forever. And because it costs nothing really, because it's 1 hour a week, and then the cost of implementation of those solutions that are found, it depends on your appetite for the activity. But because the marginal cost of the innovation activity is so low, it's so much lower than like 20% at Google that used to be there, and other practices, definitely cheaper than like innovation labs or acquiring startups in order to refresh culture and so on. It's incredibly cheap in comparison to that. And because of that, it's actually hard to stop. So it's kind of like, just like, the regenerative soil, I guess, and those practices, you would want to keep going and keep it constantly sort of rotated in the right way. Then it would be, the innovation practice happens similarly here.
Okay, so I love thinking about it this way. And I want to go back to what you said around like the 5-year plan piece, right? Because in nonprofit culture, like the strategic, the amount of organizations I know that are going through strategic planning, and even that planning process is taking 18 months, and the world is changing. But I mean, the nonprofit sector in particular, in the moment that we're talking, March 18th is entirely different than what it was 2 months ago, 3 months ago, right? Like everything has changed. And so how do you recommend for organizations, like maybe particularly legacy organizations that are so used to doing kind of more formal strategy work or more rigid strategic planning, how do they start to maybe break out of that and have this mindset shift around innovation and transformation happening in these maybe smaller groundswell ways?
Yeah, I think the steps are quite simple actually for any organization, and the effects reveal themselves over time. So like the first and most important thing that organization needs to have, and that's proven by hundreds of cases we've looked at, because I think it's important to know that there were over 200 people that helped me put together the LEAP methodology and the book itself, and mostly experts in innovation, in change, some executives on large organizations and so on. They're all listed at the end of the book. And I think the most important one item that needs to be in place, and without it, there will be no results. The most important one is someone who's like an executive who has the mandate and the willingness to drive forward, to drive change, right? So typically it would be, a COO, CEO, and so on. Unlike usually some organizations hire someone like chief innovation officer and so on, but that person wouldn't usually have enough mandate and power to actually drive with energy. So it's good to have that person, but you still need someone who's like an executive sponsor, someone who's going to be there. A founder typically works really well if that person is still around, but of course it will be an executive, but they just need to drive, right? And then the second best thing that they need to do is start and not stop. And this is what LEAP is for. Basically, it's really easy to start because you just need 5 people to spend 1 hour a week for 12 weeks and see what happens, right? Very, very easy to do. Anyone can do it, start this week. In fact, you don't need to read the book because the book comes with a free AI coach, and you can just use that to show you how to go through the cycle step by step. Just ask it for the next step. But then the most important thing is not to stop, because of course a lot of people will see it initially as like a new flavor of the month initiative. Okay, what are we doing now? There will be very little buy-in. We noticed that the first step, L, is the longest because it's there to kind of build buy-in within the group. Initially, a part of the group will be like, man, what is this that we're doing now? And some people will be excited, depending on the organization, more or less. But after like 4 weeks, usually everyone's bought in because they're seeing results. Like they're really seeing, like, okay, we're doing something meaningful here. And that one cycle, typically would drive quite a lot of results. In fact, the entire second half of the cycle is all about communication, driving buy-in, opening up people to this change. But it's not enough to really change the organization. And so you want to start another one and another one and just keep running, right? And within 6 months, 3 months, sometimes it takes 12 months if it's kind of organization that's a little more resistant to change, you start noticing that like, wow, people are actually excited now throughout the fabric of the organization to keep driving those initiatives forward, coming up with ideas and solving things. And so it doesn't have to be like that itself doesn't have to be a product of larger strategic initiative. It can be as simple as, okay, here are 5 guys, five people on the team. Let's roll with it and just spend some time together every week to find things, and the rest is sort of revealed by the steps of the framework.
Okay, what do you think are like some of the biggest surprises? Like when people go into this process, and I'm sure they have a certain level of expectation around sort of what's going to come, but in your experience, like what have some of the biggest like surprises been to companies when they've embraced this type of methodology?
Oh yeah, there's one company that we worked with this methodology 2 years ago, and we just had a meeting with them 4 weeks ago. I think we had a catch up. It turned out that the sort of ROI of the initiative, and that was like even the first leap that we did with them, because then after that it sort of stayed within the company and they ran it themselves. But I think the ROI was to the tune of, and I'm unfortunately going to approximate because I can't remember exactly right now, but it was, I think, 3,200% on like what they spent on the initiative versus what they calculated they gained out of it, which to me is shocking, right? Like it's a huge, 32,000%, 320x, and it's like a massive number in terms of return on the initiative. So that to me was honestly incredibly shocking. That's of course only possible if you have like a larger team. They have 100,000 people, so it's something that where you can really see the difference over time. But it is something that a huge result. And otherwise, I mean, there were many things that I found. I think that one of the things that are mentioned in the book that I'm sort of bringing in is, and I like to come back to that actually, because it's very, I would say, unheard of in Western culture. But when I researched the book, I talked to people in Asia, Middle East, Europe, and Americas to sort of understand the differences, cultural differences in innovation and practices. And of course, people in Asia are objectively out-innovating everyone else in the world now. And so I spent quite a bit of time trying to understand what drives those initiatives in China and Singapore and so on. And one person who runs a very interesting innovation lab that actually functions in Singapore and China and makes really old, 250 years old companies incredibly modern and data powered and so on. And I asked the founder, his name is Kenneth Tan, what's the theory? How does it work? How do you do that? And his answer was, it's love. And I really love that myself. Like they have a great sort of approach and framework behind it. The mindset in very short is such: for people to embrace change and to want to adopt new tools and to kind of get out of their sort of sticking to status quo and defensive mode, which usually means that we cannot actually embrace these new technologies, and for them to open up to it, they need to sort of develop a love for themselves to be comfortable. And to develop that, they sort of need to kind of like heal out of their traumas. They essentially need to develop passion for kind of like themselves in their roles. And then they have passion for work. And if they have passion for their work, they start looking to make the work better. And so they start contributing, right? And that's also baked into the framework. I touch on this in one of the earlier chapters, which are in kind of alignment, and dissect it a bit and then back it with data as well that I got from some more Western psychologists. But it's sort of baked into the entire system. The point is to sort of see success and see that you are of it. You are part of this innovation. You're part of the solution. And it doesn't matter what's your role at the company, but the point is you are a part of it. And only then you kind of start seeing yourself, wow, I'm actually worked on more than I thought in a way. And that brings you forward. And for that, I used like the hero's journey mechanism. So yeah, it's which hero's journey and the use of hero's journey to open up people to change is also like another interesting thing that I found.
Will you tell people a little bit about that? Will you talk a little bit more about using the hero's journey in that way?
Yeah. So, like the hero's journey is a fairly new concept. You kind of like venture out for a journey. You end up kind of finding some darker times and some usually magical beings and become your mentors, or who would that be? And you come back stronger, and then the cycle can repeat. And that I'm butchering it, but that's very, very high level sort of hero's journey, right? There needs to be kind of like this path. And so in Leap, and we've collaborated on this with some people driving innovation in London and in San Francisco. In Leap, I structured each step, each call, each week is not called a week or a step or a meeting or such. It's called a quest. And so you venture out with those people on this quest, and it's sort of, and we kind of make it a bit fun. And together you kind of, go get out there, find those things, discuss them, whatnot. You are able to over time indicate around 25 different opportunities for innovation, and then you discuss them, you form alliances, you kind of bring them together, merge them, and so on. It's a whole activity, right? That happens in a very short time. There is like a kind of rigid framework behind it, which means you can do it fast and with less cost, but you still kind of like go on this adventure, right? And then it comes halfway through, you've got this like kind of dark moment in a way, because a lot of, you rate them, or you rate all of those initiatives, and there's like a very useful system for evaluating them pretty fast rather than dwelling for weeks. You can just do it, in 1 week, in one meeting, really, unless you discuss things too long. And so many don't make it, right? Like, you have some opportunities that make it to the top and some make it to the bottom, and there's like an interesting dynamic around it, and how you can hold as a group together to the fact that like some of those maybe that will not make it to execution, but some of those opportunities do make it. And then you've got, usually around 10 kind of quick wins, smaller ideas that, just transpired, and you can do them in under a month. So they just get delegated. And so you end up having, achieving success together and so on. And then you kind of like finalize with this like big sort of presentation of this to whoever the stakeholders are. And ideally, you get approval for your one project that you've all aligned on that will then carry on, and you celebrate, right? And you celebrate often along the way. And so that kind of like brings people through this arc of hero's journey.
Okay, I love that, because it really like gamifies it for everybody, which is in sort of an exciting and inspiring way, which I think is really fun. Okay, I think there's a lot of takeaways for folks here in terms of how they start to think about digital transformation. I know we're at time. Will you tell everyone where they can get the book, learn more about you and your work? I'm really grateful for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Mallory. This has been a pleasure. Yeah, sure. Just go to leap.guide, LEAP.guide, and all the information is there. What's more, I've got the second book coming now, and very soon, which it sort of builds on the same research, but goes deeper. And it's a great book. It's like an executive brief. It's shorter, goes over some key aspects to like really achieve really high ROI, and it goes hand in hand with the framework. And previously, you would have to buy the book and prove to me that you have the book in order to get access to the tools and templates and the platform that comes with the book. But now I'm about to open it up, so anyone will be able to access those tools for free as well, and the AI coach and so on, even without the book. Of course, the book lays it out in a bit more detail. So yeah, leap.guide.
Amazing. I'm not sure how you're having time for all of these things, but I'm so grateful, and I can't wait for folks to go and check them out. And thank you for chatting with me about all of this today.
Thanks so much again. This has been a pleasure.